Today, we'll visit a town like no other in southern Puerto Rico. It's a town where we saw zero blight, no graffiti, and cleanliness all around. It's a town of friendly, welcoming people with its own emblematic drink and a yearly event that gathers thousands of visitors during Christmas season. It's a town that has had the same mayor for 24 years. So the guy has to be doing something right, don't you think? We'll visit a great waterfront area, a beautiful Baroque Catholic church, learn about one of Puerto Rico's top two poets, although the townspeople might beg to differ, discover one of Puerto Rico's most beautiful squares, visit La Casa del Rey, the original City Hall building, now a museum, attempt to visit one of the island's nicest waterfalls twice, and visit a museum dedicated to the Bible's three wise men. But not the three from antiquity, but the three from Juana Díaz, Puerto Rico. That's the town we're visiting today. After covering this year's Fiestas de la Calle San Sebastián and starting 2025 at the neighboring town of Santa Isabel, my wife and I set our sights on the town of Juana Díaz. It's a small town on the southern coast of Puerto Rico that's east of Ponce, south of Jayuya, Orocovis, and Villalba, and west of Coamo and Santa Isabel. On the south side, it has the Caribbean Sea. Juana Díaz was established on April 25, 1798, as Ciudad de Jacagua, in honor of the Taíno cacique Jacahuacs. That means that it's about to celebrate its 227th anniversary. It's also the 35th oldest municipality on the island. So how did it end up with its present name? The only town in Puerto Rico, by the way, that's named after a person. Well, legend has it that Juana Díaz was a liberated slave who was murdered while her husband, who was also a liberated slave, was conducting business in town. Together, they worked a 20-cuerda plot of land cultivating tobacco and other products. Juana Díaz was one of those people that was beloved by everyone. Or almost everyone, I guess, since she was murdered. After her death, she became sort of a legend, to the point that the town ended up with her name. And speaking of legends, rumor has it that her remains are buried under Ponce Cathedral. The town of Juana Díaz is also known for a beer-like beverage made from the bark of the Maví tree that dates back to Puerto Rico's Taíno natives. So much so that the town is known as La Capital del Maví, the capital of Maví. But frankly, I didn't see it mentioned anywhere in town. It was more or less like when we visited the town of Bayamón back in March of 2023. There was no chicharrón anywhere. And yet, they call Bayamón La Ciudad del Chicharrón. Go figure. And I like Maví, by the way. My late grandmother used to make it at her house in Brooklyn, where I spent my early childhood years. Later on, when I was a young man in Puerto Rico, there used to be street vendors selling it along the shoulders of the Ponce Expressway. But the truth is that I didn't see a single mention of Maví during our 2-day visit to Juana Díaz. When we arrived in Juana Díaz, we went straight for the Catholic church like we always do. Luckily, it was open and we walked right in. The parish is called Iglesia San Ramón Nonnatus. I guess that would be Church of St. Raymond Nonnatus in the King's English. It's a twin bell tower, Baroque building, erected in 1798, the same year when the town was founded. It's a beautiful building made of plastered masonry with great brickwork and wonderful stained glass windows. It follows that highly decorative theatrical style made popular in 16th century Italy and introduced to the Catholic Church mainly by the Jesuits. The temple has undergone extensive repairs throughout the centuries, mainly due to damage caused by hurricanes and earthquakes. But to an untrained eye like mine, it looks just fine. Just so you know, Iglesia San Ramón Nonnatus sits on the east end of Román Baldorioty de Castro Square, the city's main plaza. Román Baldorioty de Castro was a 19th century Puerto Rican abolitionist who also believed in the island's right to self-determination. However, Baldorioty de Castro was born in the town of Guaynabo, just south of San Juan. So I'm not sure how the square in Juana Díaz got to carry his name. According to Spanish colonial tradition, the Catholic Church is where it's supposed to be, on the east end of the square. But what about City Hall? Well, City Hall is a well-preserved structure built in the Spanish architectural style that sits on the north side of the square and not on the west end. And why is that? Well, the original City Hall did sit on the western end. It was called La Casa del Rey, and it's a smaller wooden structure that sits on the corner of Mariano Abril and Federico de Getó streets. Today's City Hall was built in the late 19th century following the Spanish architectural style of the time. As my wife and I left Iglesia Ramón Nonnatus, we went straight to City Hall to ask about other interesting things that we could see and do in the town of Juana Díaz. But we were instructed to ask at La Casa del Rey, which the town has renamed as Casa Real de la Historia Juanadina, which in the King's English would be the Royal House of Juanadine History, I guess. When we arrived, we met with Zenaida León, a retired school teacher who told us all about the museum and answered all of our questions about Juana Díaz. Mrs. León instructed us not to record inside the museum, but I just had to sneak out a couple of images for my audience, so if there's anyone to blame, it's me. The museum is a beautiful place where you'll learn all about the history of Juana Díaz, how the town got its strange name, the many mayors that have left their indelible marks on the town, its musical tradition, Luis Llorens Torres, an illustrious Juanadino who the townspeople would argue is Puerto Rico's national poet, and I do say argue because Juan Antonio Corredher fans from the neighboring town of Ciales to the north would certainly have something to say about that Poeta Nacional thing. But hey, they were both great Puerto Ricans. Finally, there's a gallery on the northeast corner of the museum that presents itinerating art collections. When we were there, they had a collection by Miguel Rivera Mateo, a retired Juanadino dentist who's also a cuatro player, a troubadour, and a painter. As we left the Casa Real de la Historia Juanadina, our intentions were to visit the evangelical church next door. At one time, the building was part of La Casa del Rey, but later on it was converted into a church and it looks quite nice. But, as luck would have it, the church was open when we entered the Casa Real de la Historia Juanadina and closed when we got out. Oh well. As we left the Casa Real de la Historia Juanadina, we walked south to the corner of Mariano Abril and Calle Comercio, and then west for a couple of blocks to the Plaza del Mercado. That would be farmer's market in the King's English. Except that it's not a farmer's market like you would imagine. It's more of a restored building with small shops and more of an incubator layout. Our intentions were to find some Maví, but that obviously wasn't the place. From that point on, the rest of our day could be described as a series of mishaps. We drove to the Three Kings Museum, and it was closed. Then we drove all the way to the Salto de Collores, almost in the jurisdiction of the neighboring town of Villalba, and that too was closed. Finally, we drove to Schoenstatt Shrine, a German Catholic facility next to the PR-52 expressway, and that too was closed. At that point, we were tired of striking out, so we decided to go home. But the story doesn't end there. Everything I have told you about so far happened on Tuesday, February 18th. But we decided to return on February 20th. This was the first town that we visited twice. Why? Because of the Three Kings. It made no sense making a video about Juana Díaz without visiting the Three Kings Museum. So on the morning of February 20th, after renewing my plate tag for 2025, we drove back to Juana Díaz. On the way there, we saw a sign pointing towards Municipal Road 535. It was one of those spur-of-the-moment things where you don't need to take the detour, and yet you do. That road connected us in turn with road number 1, which is the old road going between Ponce and San Juan. There, we turned west and then south at the first intersection. That road in turn led us to the Paseo Tablado de Juana Díaz and the Monumento al Pescador. In case you're wondering, that would be the Fisherman's Monument and the Juana Díaz Boardwalk. There were several things there that caught our eye. First of all, it's in great shape, free of graffiti, and with ample parking. There are several sidewalk cafes where you can have excellent seafood, traditional Puerto Rican delicacies, and of course, adult beverages. And since it's right next to the Fisherman's Village, everything is so fresh that it practically jumps out of your plate. And what about that dark sand? It's not dirty. It's actually black sand like you used to have in Mount Abu before global warming and the rise in sea levels destroyed it. There's even a fisherman's monument on the west end of the boardwalk that's actually quite nice. You can also see the small island of Caja de Muerto in the distance. That would be Coffin Island in the King's English. It actually belongs to the neighboring municipality of Ponce. It was time to head towards the Three Kings Museum, but instead of returning along Road 535, we took a different road that led us straight to the center of Juana Díaz. This time, we were lucky and we found the museum open. The Three Kings Museum is located on Calle Comercio, also known as the old road number 14, about a mile east of Román Baldorioty de Castro Square. Even though the tradition of the Three Kings of Juana Díaz was established by Father Valentín Echevarría back in 1884, the museum wasn't created until January 2nd, 2004. It was the first thematic museum of its kind in Latin America. Admittance is $3 for adults, $2 for children under 12, and $2 for seniors over 60. So what can you expect to see at the Three Kings Museum? In 2 words, a lot. On the western side of the building, there are 3 halls and a well-groomed garden. On the eastern end, there are offices, warehouses, and administrative facilities. The first hall is all about photographs, artwork, and memorabilia related to the Three Kings of Juana Díaz. This includes, of course, the 3 original capes that they wore on December 22, 2004, when they first participated in a general audience with Pope John Paul II. 18 years later, they would visit Pope Francis on December 21, 2022, for a second audience. Being one of the Three Kings of Juana Díaz isn't easy. Of course, participants have to be upstanding citizens of the Juana Díaz Society. But it takes a lot more than that. They have to be devout Catholics, go through intense scrutiny, and have a long-standing record of religious and civil service. And here's another piece of trivia for you. Did you know that the Three Kings of Juana Díaz aren't 3 at all? They're actually 15. That's right. Even with all their magic, the Three Kings of Juana Díaz can't be in 2 or 3 places at once. That's why they have stand-ins that visit more than one event on the same day or replace those kings that might be sick or indisposed. Leaving the first hall, you go through a lobby that holds several interesting pieces. There are paintings by famous Puerto Rican artists lining the walls, as well as 3 marble statues of the kings carved from genuine Juana Díaz marble. But the most eye-catching pieces are 3 huge wood carvings next to the entrance to the second hall. They were carved during a 7-day period by a group of local artists in public at Plaza del Caribe Mall in the neighboring town of Ponce. Puerto Rico has a long-standing tradition of excellent wood carving artists. In fact, there's an article on my blog Puerto Rico by GPS in which I cover one of the largest and finest collections at the Museum of the Americas in Old San Juan. But believe me, the collection at the Three Kings Museum is just as amazing. As you enter the second hall, you'll be stunned by the amount of carvings, all of them about the Three Kings of course, as well as itinerating collections of paintings by local artists. I wasn't allowed to concentrate on any particular painting, so that's why all I'm showing are painting shots. At the end of the hall, there's a staircase leading to the third hall on the second level, where you'll find dozens of additional carvings, paintings, and life-size cutouts of the Three Kings. Oh, and in case you're wondering, all the furniture is also original and carved by local artisans. Once a year, on January 6th, there's a parade that goes from the Three Kings Museum down Comercio Street to San Ramon, Nonnatus Parish. Without a doubt, the Three Kings tradition in Juana Díaz has become one of the largest religious and public events in Puerto Rico, comparable only to the Fiestas de la Calle San Sebastián. And the kings themselves have become local and island-wide heroes, with statues at the entrance to Juana Díaz, on the corner of Road 584 and 149, and at Román Baldorioty de Castro Square. But here's another piece of trivia for you. While the original 3 wise men represented the kingdoms of Persia, India, and Arabia, the 3 kings of Juana Díaz don't. They actually represent the 3 races that make up Puerto Rican society: Spanish, African, and Taíno. It was close to 3 p.m. on our second day to Juana Díaz, and we still had El Salto de Collores left on our to-do list. It's a beautiful waterfall close to the town of Villalba, where locals love to go for a dip on hot summer days. But it was raining in the mountains, and I had no intention of driving for a second time for close to half an hour just to find the place closed again. So we decided to go back to San Juan. And talking about San Juan, if you're planning to visit the old city, save yourself the hassle of traditional city tours. They're expensive, and you'll be herded along with people that won't necessarily share your interests. Instead, order the Old San Juan Walking Tour. It's packed with useful information about all the main attractions, as well as every GPS coordinate and 2 hours of exclusive online video. That way, you'll be able to visit before you visit and hit the ground running when you arrive in the old city. See you next time.